swing and a drive. Right field and deep. Back goes Aquino. It's got a chance. Gone. Get out the tape measure. Long gone.
Fly the W!
Cubs fans, it's time to fly the W with Dustin Rhodes and Paul Crawly Jean.
You are listening to the Fly the W podcast. Don't forget to listen, download, subscribe, and most importantly, review our podcast. You can follow me on the socials at Crawly's Cub on X, Blue Sky, and TikTok, and Crawly's Clubhouse on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Threads. You can email us at crawlysclubhouse@gmail.com. Don't forget to leave those 5-star reviews. They always are helpful. And joining me on the Fly the W podcast, you really should have your own theme music here, Craig. Craig Goldstein of Baseball Prospectus. This is year number what? 4? Year number 5 for you on here?
I think at least 4, yeah.
But I do always love having you on because that means baseball season's underway. We are getting ready. We have position players reporting. We have games coming up this weekend. It's a lot of fun. And obviously you guys have just dropped I think it was last week, the PECOTA projections, correct?
That is correct. We launched them on Tuesday. We try and give everyone Monday off for the Super Bowl hangover, and then hit them on Tuesday. It's baseball season.
Absolutely. And for those people that haven't seen you on the show before, let's talk a little bit about PECOTA. And I say this every year, Craig, because you get a lot of hate and you deserve none of it. You are just
I can take it. It's okay.
You are the vessel in which the machine makes its projections. Explain to our listeners who are unaware what exactly PECOTA is.
Yeah, it's a projection system. It's a projection model. It's not, I know probably people are hearing models more than anything related to AI these days. It is not AI, but it is a projection model. It takes into account the most recent statistics, and one of the biggest separators of PECOTA and any of these projection models from how people tend to do things is it has a very long memory. So it goes back on a lot of years, it values the full history of a player. Whereas I think it's not always the case, but people tend to get caught up, with a little bit of recency bias. They care most about what happened most recently, which PECOTA does too, to be honest. It weighs the most recent season the most, but it does a better job of remembering kind of the full arc of a player's career leading up to that. And this applies to both major leaguers, minor leaguers, everything like that. So it's just data, right? It's all about what its inputs are and how long its memory is. And it takes that in and ultimately spits out what it thinks every player is going to do in the upcoming season. And then it weighs, we have a team of people who operate our depth charts. And this is one of the crucial things that I think people don't always take into account, which is that how much time you allot to each player is the weight that's given to its projection. And so that's the hardest thing to do when you're looking at these things, when you're looking at any projection system, is to determine accurately like how much playing time someone is going to get, whether it's from playing time battles, from injuries, from poor performance. And that's where a lot of things go wrong for projection systems. If we project someone as the starter and getting a starter's workload, let's say 500 plate appearances, but they have a terrible April and May, maybe they get benched and then they're replaced by someone else, right? And that throws off our entire projection for not only a player, but a team. And that's going to happen. We know every year that is going to happen across the board on a number of teams. And so we update these. PECOTA gets updated overnight, every night in the season. The standings, the projected standings change overnight, every night. And all of that is due to playing time, injuries, things like that. So it's something that we're always seeking to improve. And it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing to do is projecting out that playing time, pitcher workloads, things like that.
Well, here is what you had to say last year. This is you and I talking last year
check here
about the PECOTA projections. Your 2025 PECOTA projections for the NL Central. We have our Chicago Cubs at 90 wins, 71 losses. Milwaukee at 80 and 81. St. Louis 78 and 83. Pittsburgh 71 and 86. And in the basement, you have the Cincinnati Reds. All right. Now, I told everybody not to bet the farm, not to bet the kids' college education last year. And so if we're looking at PECOTA and last year and taking a look, again, you had the Cubs at 90 wins, taking the division, Milwaukee at 80, St. Louis at 78, Pittsburgh at 75, not 71. There's my vision. And then Cincinnati at 73. Now, when we take a look at how this all played out, you were pretty much spot on with the Cubs, 92.
Let's stay there.
92. And when you look at the Cardinals, and I'm looking at the Cardinals here, I mean, that was kind of that was pretty close at 78. Yeah. And then the Pirates,
three wins is pretty good. We generally in the when you're looking at projections, the community, 3 wins is considered a win. If you're within 3 wins, plus or minus, that's not so bad. The rest of them are going to be a little tougher.
Right. Now the 2 that were off were the Cincinnati Reds, who ended up in the postseason with 83 wins. You had them with 73. So that's a difference of about 10 there.
Yeah.
And then, boy, oh boy, I hate to go over this one, but the Milwaukee Brewers.
No, it's okay.
97.
Yep.
That's a 17-game difference. Now, when we talked last year, I said, Craig, I said, Milwaukee always seems to, do some sort of weird voodoo magic, and the projections never seem to get Milwaukee right. And we talked about used to be St. Louis, used to be Tampa Bay, used to be Baltimore. Okay. There have been teams in the past that for whatever reason the projection models cannot get right. And I mean 17 games. I mean that. And again, think about you and I were talking last year. They got to replace Willy Adames. How are they going to do that? And somehow, some way, this Brewers team figures it out. And I keep telling people I am not going to pick the Cubs to win the division until I see them beat the Brewers when they end up in first place, because I don't know, somehow they find a way to do it. What are they doing, and why is it such a struggle for the projection models?
Yeah, well, I don't know that we know exactly what they're doing. Otherwise, our projections would probably be a little bit different, right? But no, it's a great question, and we actually had two kind of takes on this on the site last week during PECOTA week. One was from Rob Maines, one of our writers, who talked about he does this every year, but his article is titled "Who Are You Going to Trust, PECOTA or Your Lion Eyes?" And he talks about kind of what I did early on in terms of introducing the system about what PECOTA is good at, and it is, broadly speaking, very good, but it does get these teams wrong, right? It will miss by a lot. We again, when we got the Orioles wrong by, I think, 26 games a few years ago. We got the White Sox wrong. We overshot the White Sox when they were, the worst team in baseball a couple years ago. So this absolutely does happen. The Milwaukee does seem to always outrun it, but I in Rob's article, he mentions it was only, I think, 2023 that we overshot them by 6 games. And that's not that long ago, right? They have been consistently good year after year. And we did have a problem for a while where we overshot them. Again, we're looking at, I know we're going to get to this year's projections. It looks very similar to last year for Milwaukee and for Chicago. But I think one of the reasons Jonathan Judge, who is responsible for PECOTA for us, and is a Brewers fan, actually, he talked about this in the piece he wrote for us for PECOTA week last week. But Milwaukee plays a lot of early career players, right? Part of their model as a organization in terms of keeping their costs down is they play a lot of young players. Young players necessarily have shorter track records, and any projection system is going to prefer guys who have an extensive track record at the major league level. That's the one with the most signal among all their numbers. And Milwaukee consistently plays guys who don't have as long a track record, right? And we've seen this play out. And again, this isn't like it's not just about like, oh, they're tricking the model. They're not, but they're really good at something. And I think I talked about this with you last year in regards to St. Louis for a while, but they're really good at taking, getting a good run of performance for someone and then cycling them out when that run seems to be dying out. We saw this with Isaac Collins last year. Isaac Collins got rookie of the year votes. He looked like a top, 3 rookie of the year player for most of the year. August comes and he hits a wall. September comes around and he's barely playing. We barely saw him in the playoffs, right? And they react to that kind of thing really quickly and really well. And part of their ability to do that is they always have someone of broadly equivalent talent ready to step in. And so there are always going to be times someone performs above their what you might want to call a true talent level, right? And if you can capture that as a team, and then as they're coming back to earth, say, okay, let's give someone else who, again, maybe has the same true talent level, but isn't on the downswing, maybe we can get them some playing time. And again, we see that they traded Isaac Collins this offseason. We saw them get a great season relatively out of Caleb Durbin. They traded him this offseason, right? And then they're going to go back into the free agent market and at a relative discount get Luis Rengifo, who has had pretty good years in the past, had an awful year last year. So they're going to get him at a discount. They're going to bring him into the mold after shipping out these other 2 guys. It's a very refined process that they have. This is my theory, right? Jonathan wrote about this, but I absolutely agree with it as a theory as to some of the reasons they're able to get extra performance out of these guys that the model is not seeing. They also are incredible in terms of pitching development, right? And so one of the things we talked about last year was when Baltimore was beating the projections, when Kansas City was beating the projections, a lot of that was coming out of their bullpen, right? Elite bullpen over performance in the sense that they could take their A-team bullpen and use them in close games and then not worry so much about games if they were losing or ahead by a lot. They could use these other guys and maybe the numbers come out not so good for them, but the run differential in the season wasn't incredible, but they were using different guys in different situations. Milwaukee's ability to develop pitching both in the rotation, but especially in the bullpen, is remarkable. And so they're consistently able to generate these kind of bullpen arms, at least in the short term, and cycle through them and create a ton of depth in the organization. And again, when someone's going bad, they either they end up on the IL or they send them back down to the minors. We saw Logan Henderson come up and dominate for like 8 starts, and then they just sent him back down because they had someone else ready to step in. And they got 8 great starts from him, but we never saw the regression that might have come for him had he stayed in the majors. So they're just really good at this type of thing. And I'm sure, I don't know, but I feel like when we talked last year, I would have said, yeah, take the over on that. They're going to do better than that.
You did. I went back and I listened to it today, and you did say, that they were going to outperform that. You did say that.
I don't think I would have projected 97. I don't think I'm not trying to take credit for that. But again, there are always, this is something to inform everyone's sensibilities. You don't have to agree with it. I don't always agree with it. I'm going to take the over on Milwaukee again when we talk about it for this year. But it's another perspective, right? It's in a lot of ways, people might quibble with this, but it's an objective perspective, right? It's doing what it's doing, and this is what it spits out. We don't put our thumb on the scale. We're not trying, when we see something, we saw this before it went live. We all said, oh, we think Milwaukee's going to do better than that, but we don't put our thumb on the scale to change the number, because ultimately in the aggregate, it generally does a very good job.
Well, without further ado, here we go. The 2026 PECOTA projections. Here you go. Your Chicago Cubs, 90 wins, 71 losses in first place. Milwaukee, 80-81. Pittsburgh, 79-82. Cincinnati, 78-83. And then St. Louis in last place, where I like to see them, 65-96. So when we look here, the Cubs have 90 wins. One thing that you talked a lot about last year when we were on the show was about the depth of the Cubs all over the place. But this year, you really take a look at the depth in pitching, and it really is pretty impressive.
Yeah. I'm looking at our tool that we use to create our season previews, and they have what we do is we show the playing time projected for each starter in terms of percentage of games started, and then their WARP projections individually, and then as a group, and it's color coded. And so there's a deep green for the best rotations. They're not quite there, but they're in a light green. I would say, looking at the number, we project their rotation right now for just shy of 14 wins above replacement. That's really close to the deep green. It's very close. And the thing is, every single starter that we project to get even 10% games started is in that same exact light green. So it is, when you talk about depth, now this is the problem with the Cubs, or has been the problem with the Cubs. It's both a strength and a weakness. They don't necessarily have that guy you're like, that's your game one starter. Now, last year it would have been Cade Horton had he been healthy, almost definitely, right? And that's the question with a lot of these guys, is ultimately health. It's true of Edward Cabrera, who they just brought in, Shota Imanaga. Obviously, we want to see a full season from Cade Horton, or even just healthy at the right time. Ultimately, I think Cade Horton can get to that level. Absolutely. I think he has that upside. But in terms of the projection, it's good. And this is 6 starters deep. This includes Justin Steele, right? So Justin Steele is going to come off the IL at some point, but it's a lot of number 3-ish starters in terms of the ultimate archetype. Again, I think Horton can get above that. We've seen Imanaga get above that. And honestly, I know he was taking a step back, but before the hamstring injury, you would have been just fine with Shota. There wouldn't have been. I know they had a very weird situation with the declining of the option, and then he declined and then accepted the QO, and it puts everyone in a weird spot. And it was a very rough end of the season. I do wonder how everything's gonna look if he's actually able to be healthy entering the season. I don't think people are going to be so unhappy with that situation, with him coming back, if he can maintain his health. But I mean, this again, all the way through from Boyd, Tyone, Imanaga, Cabrera, Horton, and Steele, it's a tremendous amount of depth. And then again, they brought back Colin Ray, you have Javier Assad, and you need that kind of depth to survive a season. If you want to win the division, and I saw the owner talking about wanting to win the division today. If you want to win the division, you have to have that kind of depth. You don't have to have that kind of depth to advance deep into the playoffs. You can get in as a wild card and make a run, but if you want to win the division, and as he noted, I don't like to give him a lot of credit usually, but as he noted, there are advantages to winning the division. If you want to do that, you have to do what the Cubs did in terms of their pitching staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm going to give you, Craig. You guys got the Brewers 80 and 81, like a 500 team. You are saying take the over. Now, you said you wouldn't have bet the Brewers being 17 over it. I'm not going the PECOTA. I'm going the Craig Goldstein. What are your win? Give me the over under. What do you think the Brewers, how many wins will the Milwaukee Brewers have this year?
The Craig Goldstein gut projection.
Yes.
Oh man, Milwaukee is so tough. I am going to probably be lower than I think most people would be. I know the Milwaukee fans take it as a sign of disrespect. It's not a sign of disrespect. I do think the Cubs are a really good team. I understand where you're coming from on not wanting to predict the Cubs take the division until they actually do it. I completely understand that. But since I'm not a Cubs fan, I do think the Cubs are the better team. Entering the year, I think they're the better team. I'm going to say 87, 88 wins. That's where I have Milwaukee. I think they're a playoff team.
88.
Yeah, I think something right around that range. If I can hedge on one win a little bit, that's right around where I am.
I do have to thank your Dodgers for sweeping those Brewers, but Pittsburgh in surprising third place. Now you didn't like Cincinnati. PECOTA did not like Cincinnati last year. Yeah. They don't like Cincinnati this year.
No.
How were they able to get into the postseason, and why do you think that doesn't look repeatable?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm probably a little bit higher on Cincinnati than PECOTA is, but also we're talking about 5 wins, right? And again, I said 3 wins is a win, 5 wins is a miss. I'm not calling it not a miss, but it's not egregious, right? I mean, that's
Mhm.
not a huge deal. A lot of that is they made the playoffs, but 6 teams make the playoffs. 83 wins is not far from a 500 season. You know what I mean? But I do think I think Cincinnati is upside. It's their and I think if you're a Cincinnati fan, or again, just even in the division, you can look at it and say, we know Ellie De La Cruz played through a torn or strained quad a significant part of the year, and that they probably would have been better had he been healthy the whole year, or even just taken an IL stint and came back and been healthy. His performance really fell off in a significant way. I really like Cincinnati's pitching, and we were just talking about the Cubs pitching, obviously, but something PECOTA wasn't going to take into account is necessarily like Chase Burns. And I know Chase Burns' seasonal numbers, he had a pretty inflated ERA, but he gave up 10 earned runs in one start against the Red Sox. But he also, in that mix, had 5 straight starts of 10 plus strikeouts. I mean, this guy to me and I think I said this last year, is maybe the most fun pitcher to watch for me. He's not as good as Paul Skeens, right? I'm not saying he's the best pitcher, but his stuff is so dynamic. It's an easy 98. It's a hellacious slider. He is just one of my favorite pitchers to watch. And again, you go down the line of that rotation. I don't have it in front of me, but Hunter Green, Chase Burns, Nick Lodolo, why am I blanking on the Andrew Abbott? This is, and then Brady Singer is in most rotations a solid number 3, and he's maybe their 5th best starter. They need to stay healthy. I think a lot of it is what the system looks at and what our depth charts are doing. And this is why I'm saying, people, when you look at this, go take a look at the depth charts, because you'll find stuff you disagree with, but you can understand then where the disagreement lies, right? And so maybe it is in the projection of a particular player, but it's also we try and be conservative, because it is a long season. 162 games is a lot of games, and a lot of guys get hurt and miss time. So we try and spread out that playing time. We have a marker in our system for our depth charts team that says if you have someone even at 90% playing time as a position player, there's a flag that comes up that says, are you sure you want to do that? Because the reality is so few players actually hit those marks, and especially consistently, right? The guys who do it a lot, there's wear and tear over time. And so they end up falling off at some point. So my guess is this is not an exceedingly deep organization at the upper levels. And so once you start drawing playing time off of those starters, you start giving it to guys who don't project particularly well. And again, if someone gets through a season unscathed, they're going to overperform. And that's going to show up in their individual stat line, and it's going to show up in the team stat line. But I'm not looking at that as we're talking, but if I had to guess, that's where it's coming from. And then just the bats. As far as the lineup goes, Ellie De La Cruz, obviously dynamic, but things get a little bit hairy relatively quickly. I know they just brought in Nathaniel Lowe, but if you're bringing in Nathaniel Lowe in February, you might be admitting your internal depth and your lineup might not be in the shape you want it to be in, right?
Now, you talked a little bit about, guys not being able to last a whole season. Now, that's really hard over a 162 period. And one guy that you and I were both excited for last year, Kyle Tucker, just, he's now with your Dodgers,
Yep.
but could not stay healthy, really struggled, especially in the second half. Now, to offset the loss of Kyle Tucker, in comes Alex Bregman. What does PECOTA think about Alex Bregman? Because before he hurt his quad, he was having a damn good year for Boston.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, this is one of those things. Right? I just mentioned it with Ellie De La Cruz. I was looking at it for another article of ours for PECOTA Week. We looked at 7 hitters that PECOTA likes relative to their last season in their career, and 2 of them, William Contreras, who played through a broken finger, and one was Ellie De La Cruz, who played through the strained quad. And again, you bring up Kyle Tucker, who played through a finger injury and some other injuries, and his performance suffered. I mean, these guys, again, credit to them to some degree for taking the field, right? But especially for someone like Tucker, the Cubs had some depth. Now I know Casey didn't perform that well in his sample and stuff like that, but like they had some options, right? They could DH Ballesteros and put Suzuki out there if they needed to. It's not necessarily ideal, but I don't know if you're helping the team or hurting the team by playing through an injury. Some of it depends on who's coming in behind you, right? So and Bregman, to your point, had the quad injury, but he actually took some time off, and he wasn't the same right when he got back, but still looked phenomenal beforehand. PECOTA has him as a 115 DRC plus. That's deserved runs created. It's people might be familiar with Fangraph's weighted runs created. It's a catch-all offensive metric. It takes into account a lot of things. It's our own spin on it. But 115 as a projection is quite strong. It's 15% better than league average. He's definitely performed higher than that. Some of that is he's 32. There's some degradation built in for guys, on the downside of their primes. He's still in that prime window, but towards the back of it. But 115, and then with his defense at third base, you're looking at almost a 4-win player, 4 wins above replacement. So that's really, really strong. It's actually the best in the lineup that we have projected right now. But again, like the rotation, the strength of the Cubs lineup is a bunch of guys at 10 to 15% better than league average. And that just grinds down opposing pitchers.
Absolutely. And, last year we talked about PCA and PECOTA's projections for him. And this year there's going to be, they're trying to find spots for Matt Shaw, and Moises Ballesteros looks like he's going to get the crack for DH. We talked about how kind of it's a little bit tougher for PECOTA to project guys that don't have a lot of numbers. But as far as Matt Shaw or Moises Ballesteros, does PECOTA have one that they prefer?
Ballesteros, 6% better than league average, 106 DRC plus, which again, for a guy who barely played in the majors, is a really strong projection. And if you look at some of I wrote up for PECOTA week, I keep saying it, I apologize, some interesting rookie projections and some guys who ranked, I only looked at guys who didn't get any major league playing time last year, but who were at the top of our prospect list. The vast majority of those guys who even have crazy minor league numbers, right, just absolutely tearing through the minors, will get below league average major league projections because it's the biggest jump that there is from the minors to the majors. And so for Ballesteros to come in with the limited track record he has with a 106 is actually a pretty strong endorsement from the model. And Matt Shaw is at 97. That's actually not that bad. He had a tough year last year, generally speaking. And so for 97, I think that's even a little bit of a show of faith in there. And again, I want to let people know these are 50th percentile projections. This is the median projection. And if you're a subscriber, you can download our spreadsheet, and we have tabs on it from first percentile up to 99th percentile at different intervals. So you can look at, there are different percentiles that we project these guys at. This is just the median one. We understand that these guys contain multitudes. It's not, sometimes you just have your best year ever. Sometimes you don't. But so everything I'm quoting here is the median projection.
Well, it looks like a lot of fun. It looks like we're going to be, the NL Central, always competitive, always a little bit fiery, a little bit chippy. I'm going to give you the last word. What would you like to say, Cub fans, going into the last year? You were bullish on the Cubs and it paid off. What are your final thoughts for Cubs fans going into the 2026 season?
I'm still bullish, and what I would say is I think this is going to sound like last year. I didn't go back and listen, so I don't have to recall that you do on it. But I think I'd say I'm willing to go out there and say I think the Cubs are going to win the division. And I think you should feel confident. I think I said that last year, but I do think you should feel confident. There is a lot of depth here. There's a lot of upper minors depth. And I think they have what it takes to get through the season. And ultimately, as frustrating as it was, I'm sure, to not win the division last year, 92 wins last year. That's a nice season. It's not dominant, but it's a nice season. It can win the division in a lot of years, especially the Central. I don't know that Milwaukee goes on the type of run that they did in July. Especially last year, they were on just an absolute tear, and that helped them put up 97. But yeah, I think again, I look at these teams, and I think if you try and not lose yourself in the Milwaukee is always doing something special of it all, you go down position by position. I think you'd look at the Cubs having an advantage at a lot of them, right? And so I think you can take that to heart. And it's hard. It's hard to put your hopes out there because we know how it can end up. And I understand. Even though I'm a Dodgers fan, I do understand that. I swear. But I think it's worth doing. I think you can be confident entering the year, and I think you should go in with a little bit of swagger.
All right, Craig, tell our listeners where they can find your work and where they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, first and foremost, Baseball Prospectus. It's just baseballprospectus.com. It is a subscription site, but we do put stuff outside the paywall, so you're able to check it out even if you're not a full-on subscriber. I highly recommend subscribing. You get a lot of great stuff, great writings. You get writing. You get access to the projections. We have an additional tier where you can use. You can contact our fantasy team. You get an answer within 24 to 48 hours directly to you. No one else sees it. So that's a special service if you're in on the fantasy side. And then on social, CD Goldstein at .baseballprospectus.com on Blue Sky. That's really where I do everything. You can follow Baseball Prospectus there at baseballprospectus.com. We are on Twitter, or X, excuse me, at Baseball Pro there. And yeah, that's where you'll find us.
All right, Craig, you have made me confident. Now I'm going to enter the season with swagger, and we're going to do this again next year, my friend.
I can't wait. Thank you so much.
It's all over.